Welcome to the Channel Chat podcast. Hello, I'm Marc Sumner, host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today I have Gareth Capon, the CEO of Grabyo, in the virtual house. How are we doing, Gareth?
Very good, thanks, Mark. Good to be here.
Good. Thanks very much for coming on. Gareth, I was hounding you to come on because you are the CEO of one of the UK's Tech Track 100 companies, which sort of showcases the fastest growing companies in the UK, or the tech companies in the UK. So I wanted to find out a bit more about you guys because I didn't know the brand. To be honest with you, I didn't know the brand too much, but I thought if you could give the sort of Channel Chat listeners a bit of an overview of Grabyo and how the business sort of come about in the first place.
Sure, happy to. And we're a business-to-business brand, so we wouldn't necessarily expect lots of the fans or the audience out there to have heard of Grabyo. But the easiest way to describe perspective, if you're interested in sport or news or entertainment, and you spend any time on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, there's a very strong chance that you've seen a video created using the Grabyo platform, Grabyo technology, that's been shared out by one of our partners onto those platforms, and that's really where the business started. So if you're watching Chelsea and Man City's escapades in the Champions League in the last few weeks on BT, and you saw clips of that on Twitter, then that would have been BT Sport using Grabyo's technology to share that content, and that's really where the business started. We started as a tech platform to help broadcasters, sports teams, federations, people like All England Club at Wimbledon, or the FA, or BT Sport, or news organisations to share clips of TV on social media. That was the start of the business. But the bigger vision was to build out more of the tools for how video and TV is created. It's traditional production. So instead of having to roll up huge trucks outside a sports venue or to a breaking news story, that you can sit at home on your laptop and do it all in the cloud. And we're right in the middle of building out that technology now. And we've grown from a couple of people in Chiswick when we started 6-7 years ago to now having 4 offices around the world, and we're about 76 people, and we've got customers in 45 countries. So it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, it sounds like a whirlwind. Now, I mentioned before we got online, you mentioned that you'd done a couple of startups before, but when I looked at your background, you'd obviously been in the Sky and you'd obviously had a pretty good job there. So what made you do the mad thing of going into a startup and leaving that behind? Tell me why you did it.
Yeah, exactly. I should probably ask my wife, who was definitely a little bit shocked at the time as I walked away from a good job at Sky to go back into earning no money but running a startup. I think that I've always loved building things, and I think that I was always Will, Neil, and I used to set the business up. We'd known each other for a long time. We actually started our career together at Accenture as a management consultant many years ago. And I was sort of working in Sky, building mobile applications, working on some of the investments in technology companies there. And it was really clear to me that the way that the video was being created and watched was changing fast. And the mobile revolution was a really cool part of that. That people were watching much more video on their phone. They were, the phone was becoming like the central piece of technology to people's media lives. And there was also this massive growth in social media platforms. And so I just looked at the industry and thought, this is going to be really important. The Facebook and YouTube and Amazon and others are going to be really important parts of the video industry, and that I think that the consumer behavior is changing in terms of the way that people watch TV. So the chance to go and build a business that was part of that was pretty exciting, and I was ready for the challenge of doing it. And I think just getting together with someone I'd known for a long time made it easier. And then, like you say, you jump in and you try to build a good business, and you never know how it's going to go at first. But it is rewarding if you get it right, and you go along on the roller coaster and enjoy the ups and try not to worry about the downs too much.
And you mentioned it there about building teams. Now, you mentioned your partners. I think Neil, you mentioned. So when you started off, and it was just a couple of you in Chiswick. How do you then sort of build a team and make sure you've got people bought into the culture? Because it's quite difficult as you're growing as well, because there's one thing having a vision with you and Neil, 2 people, but as you're growing, you're almost growing beyond the culture yourself as you're exponentially growing. So how did you sort of go about building the team?
Yeah, I think it's obviously one of the hardest things when you're running a startup to be able to do that, and it's fundamental to the success of the business, is to be able to build a company that's got great people within it. And actually, any good startup is generally the sum of the people within it, not the it's not necessarily the technology, not necessarily the idea, not necessarily the market. So we were lucky that we had a couple of great, engineers who we knew early on, who sort of founded the core part of that engineering team. And then as we, as we grew, obviously you had people in sales and marketing and customer success and all of these other pieces. But it's nice to think that our VP of engineering and our CTO were those two initial engineers. So they're still with the business. They've grown, they've developed. They're now running a 40, 50 person engineering team, and I think that's a testament to to their hard work and commitment, but also shows if you get a good team around you at the start, you can do great things. But as you grow, it's so important to get good people within the organization.
Yeah, fantastic. What a great story. So obviously no one could have predicted what we've gone through over the last 12 months about the pandemic, but it strikes me that your technology offering couldn't have been better positioned really to sort of capitalize on this condition. So can you talk me through the last sort of 12 months, what's happened at Grabyo?
Sure. I mean, obviously it's been a pretty challenging environment for everyone over the last 12 months, but I think the piece that's been, we've been very lucky with is that we're building tools to create video in the cloud, as we discussed, and make it easy to create live shows, to create highlights and clips from, just using a laptop and a web browser and internet connection. So although from a sports perspective, obviously when the sports industry shut down, there was a downturn in demand for for clips and highlights of live sport. It's pretty hard to do that when there isn't any sport happening. Yeah. But where the growth really came was on the live streaming side, the live production, started to create new types of shows that we've all got used to now, whether it's seeing a behind the scenes look at what a player's doing at training at home because they're in lockdown, or a pre-match show for Chelsea Football Club when they're about to play on the Champions League, and seeing these kind of 4-person Zoom formats that we get used to now on the internet, which is now like a part of mainstream sort of video culture. So our technology has been used for a whole range of things within that, from really small scale sort of social media, Facebook Live or a YouTube live show, right up to big broadcast productions for esports and even on TV in some markets. So there's a ton of work to do from a technology perspective, of course, but this sort of forced experiment of everyone being at home has really allowed people to recognize actually the way that TV and video is created can change, and we can do things in a much more distributed, flexible way, and that's going to be great for our business over the next few years.
Yeah, fantastic. I noticed on your website, you work some with top tier clients like EA Sports, UFC, the FA. Now, Gareth, every company dreams of working with companies like this. Fantastic. Not just good brands, but obviously from sports capability as well. How did you go about winning these customers?
Yeah, we're really lucky to work with such a great range of broadcasters and sports federations and team. I think that if you go back to where we started, when we started as a business, it was a live clipping company that I discussed, and we still do 20,000 clips a week through our platform on mostly on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, Instagram, etc. So the demand for that, if you think about it, is for content that's live. People want to know what's happening, and sport is an obvious place to start. The demand to see a goal from Harry Kane, just after it's happened on social media is pretty high. So there was a really good fit in sport. Which allowed, and once you get a foothold in the sports industry, it's definitely easy to build on that. So that really helped. We also, if you, I don't know whether you did any investigation to our investors, but we were lucky enough to have a couple of footballers in Thierry Henry and Cesc Fabregas and Robin van Persie, and then Tony Parker from the NBA be invested in the seed round of the company, which was not necessarily a plan at the time, but definitely helped us with some exposure in the sports industry. They've been great investors, so that was a good place to start for our journey in sport.
Yeah, because I'm an Arsenal season ticket holder, and I noticed that, and I was thinking, how has he got those 3 people? And they're all ex-Arsenal players as well. How is it bespoke to Arsenal? Because, as I said, I've got four club level tickets to the Emirates. Obviously, I haven't been there this year. And I did notice that. I was thinking, he's got Arsenal legends here investing. So how did that come about?
Well, it wasn't a formal plan that we went out with to go and get some footballers in for our seed round, but we were introduced to them via sort of a mutual friend, talking about a small investment in the company when we're just getting it set up. They really liked the idea, really liked technology. They actually, Thierry even mentioned when he was out, in the US then, playing in the MLS, and he said actually his ability to catch up on the Premier League was often through social media and clips and highlights more than those games weren't always available on the TV at the time. So they really liked the idea, and they got behind it and said, look, we want to back you, and that was really where the conversation ended. So they became our seed investors, really supportive set of investors. It's been great to have them, and certainly helped, really helped with our profile in the early days, which is good. I think over time, as we built the company, we've expanded into many other markets, and we're doing working with in different verticals in news and entertainment and events. But the support in the early days was really good, and I certainly know that our appearances on various tech conferences, etc. When Thierry and Seth and others turned up for it, I'm sure they definitely weren't inviting me. I think there was another draw for that audience, but we went along and got the benefit, so I can't complain too much.
Oh, great. So I noticed that Grabyo was nominated for the top tech ones to watch in 2019, then part of the top tech 100 in 2020. How did these come about? Because I think I mentioned to you offline, are these, most companies would love to get involved in these awards. And I often wondered, is it, and don't take this the wrong way, Gareth, is it ego stroking? Is it good PR? Is it you get invited? Or how has it come about?
Yeah, so we were approached to sort of participate, and they said that we've heard a lot about the company, that you guys are growing. Would you like to sort of submit an application? Obviously, you have to apply. They have to look at your profile and your numbers, etc. So that happened. I think in the end, for the first when we were sort of in the ones to watch, they said, look, we're interested in the business. It looks like you're in a really interesting space in terms of the industry, what's happening in video, growing quickly. I think that obviously the background of the investors was quite interesting too, so that helped with profile. And then obviously the following year, we got into the top 100 as the business has continued to expand, which is nice. And I think you're right. I think there are a number of benefits to it. If it depends on what it is you need as a business. I mean, we've been quite focused on building a sustainable, profitable company, and we did that for the last few years. But these types of these lists, the exposure to paper, it helps with investors, it helps with exposure to potential customers. It's good validation of what you're doing. It certainly even helps with recruitment to an extent. The company, in people who may want to join the company are seeing that you're in a really interesting sector, that the business is growing, that you're continuing to invest and expand the team. So I think for all those reasons, it's really helpful. But essentially, right, it is as much of a PR exercise as anything else, just to put you on the map with potentially people who've not heard about you before, and for that reason, it's always really useful. And
have you actually got any business related to just because you've got into those awards? Because I noticed you straight away when I saw about the top tech 100, and I was thinking, didn't know much about these guys, and I was really interested in your business. But how do you think you've got approaches from companies to use your services, or it's helped with pitches because you're into that top tech 100?
It's certainly helped with, I would say, maybe not in our sort of core sectors in sport and broadcast, where we were pretty well known, we had a good reputation and a good brand, but maybe in some of the other sectors, in virtual events, or some of the brand executions, etc., where maybe that we didn't have such a strong presence, that we didn't have such a strong customer base. These companies seeing your position, recognizing that you're a good company. At one level, one of the things that is really helpful with is people validating that this is a real business that has scale and revenue and is solid. So there's definitely a trust factor there. There's a validation of trust for the business. But I don't think we spent huge amounts of time saying, look, this is something that we have to go around and really shout about, and this is like a core part of our marketing proposition to customers. I don't think it's that, but it's certainly great to be able to talk about it on social media channels and tell customers. And I think we've certainly had some inbound interest from other probably companies in other sectors that we don't talk to as often, but saying, actually, look, we're really interested in live video. We've read what you guys are doing. We'd love to come and find out more.
And you mentioned there about other sectors. Now, the obvious one was with sports. Everyone likes looking at live clips, and obviously you mentioned Harry Kane goal or whatever it is after the event. What other sectors do you see as the opportunity for Grabyo to go into?
One of the most interesting things in the last 12 months is the enormous growth in live video in a huge number of markets, whether that's everything from us doing Zoom calls at home to have meetings with colleagues and customers, right through to corporate town halls or investor relations, or virtual events, probably the fastest growing new technology sector of the last year. And all of those are very relevant to our business. Our live production, our live video platform, where you can actually create and manage virtual events. You can do streaming for broadcast, for corporate town halls, really for anything that's live. And you can invite people to participate as you would do on a Zoom chat or a Google Hangout. You can use our own platform to do that, and then you can make it look professional. You can add graphics to it. You can do all the video switching and the mixing and the audio, the things that you do in a more traditional TV environment, which in the past would have taken hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of hardware. It would have needed a physical facility, maybe an outside broadcast truck, maybe satellite. Now you can, with a laptop and a couple of people, you can do all of that in Grabyo entirely remotely in an entirely distributed fashion. So for that, I think there's enormous opportunity. And I think that demand for live video, live events isn't going to change, even when you can go back to physical events, and even when we can all go back to the office, at least some of the time, it seems. I don't think these things are going to change. I think this demand for some of these services is going to be there forever, and is actually going to grow, because there's a recognition that if you want to bring someone in to be part of a conference or a corporate event or an investor relations call, whatever it is, they don't need to physically be in the same place anymore, and actually you can create a really high quality video experience without any of the demands for location, and you can scale it up and scale it down on demand. And that's the big difference of a platform like Grabyo with regards to traditional technology, as you're buying all this really expensive hardware and you have to keep it forever, and it only gets used when it's on. With Grabyo, you could scale our platform up to huge numbers of video feeds and ingests and outputs, as we've done for many esports events, for example. And 2 days later, shut all the technology down and turn off the tap and the cost. And that's a completely different model for the way that the video and events are going to be created in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you've experienced 50% growth or 53% growth in 2020. What has been the challenges you've had to overcome as you've grown so quickly over the last couple of years?
Well, it's always exciting to be growing, and it's not. Definitely think about that generally as a challenge. I think a lot of it comes down to the way that the processes that go behind it. I think growing internationally is definitely been a challenge at times as we start to hire people in different countries, in different markets, and also the cultural and the operational differences of those markets you have to get to know. So that's something that we've spent quite a lot of time thinking about. A lot as you scale, obviously you need more process and more structure within the team, just to make sure your customers are getting supported properly. And we're a really product and customer centric business, so we want to make sure that we're building things that people want and that they need, and that they solve problems. And if we're doing that, our customers are going to be happy. So ensuring that you keep that feedback loop working effectively is really important. And of course, over time, environments will get more competitive. You expect that any good market is going to see more competition, and will, and as we see particularly some of the in our particular market, maybe some of the more traditional, larger companies, more legacy companies, are moving now into the cloud space, then it creates new levels of competition and drives our business on further. So I think all of those things they're pretty normal for any CEO, definitely any startup CEO. But the exciting thing is being in a market which is expanding. You want to be in a place where you can look forward and say, actually, this industry, this sector is going to be 10, 100, 1,000 times bigger in the next decade. And if you're in there and you're swimming downstream, then hopefully good things can happen for the business.
Great. And my last question for you, Gareth, and I'm not asking you to be Mystic Meg or give predictions about COVID, but for the next sort of 6 months, where do you see the sort of future of Grabyo, and where do you see the future of the market and the opportunity for you guys?
Well, we're really focused on building out tools for live video production, the way that TV and video is created, and really helping to reimagine that and make that entirely available in the cloud. And that the reason that the benefits of that we discussed already, really, that the flexibility, the fact that you can build these services and direct and create the services from any location. You don't need to physically be in an environment, to create a show or to create a sports event or, create a virtual event, whatever it may be. I think that's really exciting. There's real demand for that. I think there are massive benefits to that from a customer perspective too, whether that's the environmental sustainability benefits of not having to put people on planes and fly kits and the people all around the world. I think there are lifestyle benefits too. We know there's certain people in the video industry who didn't have the opportunity to maybe build their career, particularly women who often would, be more often staying at home with children. So flying out to Abu Dhabi for a Formula One race or going on site for a news production was not possible. So these people didn't necessarily have all the opportunities that they could have had as a producer or a director if they physically had to be on site. That might now change if we can take away the requirement to be on site to do these things. And as we said at the start, I think the number of people wanting to create live videos really gone up. I think the first phase of that we've seen in the last 12 months, it's been, you know, the Zoom calls and the people at home and the slightly, you know, grainy video on a news broadcast, you know, talking about COVID or whatever it may be. But the next phase of that, people say, well, we want to continue doing that, but we want it to be better. We want it to be better quality. We want it to be more reliable. We want it to look more like what we would all know as TV, this high quality production experience. And we want to build the tools to make that happen and make it flexible, easy to use, you know, much more cost effective. And if we can do that, hopefully, you can bring really great, you know, live video to lots more people. And I think that's what the audience wants, whether you're watching on a smartphone or your 60-inch OLED TV in your living room.
Yeah, absolutely. Gareth, you've been a great guest. Thanks very much for your time.